Hello, my crafty friends. Well, today we are going to play around with a little bit of heat embossing, and I have 3 different ways that you can use this heat embossing in your card making. Hi, it's Lynn Dunn from Stamptastic Designs. Thanks so much for joining me today. In this episode of Stamptastic TV, I have 3 beautiful card ideas that I want to share with you that feature some heat embossing with some white embossing powder and a little bit of coloring with the Stampin Blends. Now, if you don't like coloring, don't worry. This particular technique is super simple and you don't have to color the entire image. So I'm going to give you some tips on how to do that. Now, the cards in this video feature the hand-drawn bloom stamp set from Stampin Up. So we're going to use this very large bloom here to create the cards that I'm sharing with you today. Now, you do not necessarily need this particular stamp set because this technique that I'm going to share with you will work with any stamp set that you have on hand. Now, I do recommend that you find a stamp set that's very detailed to do this particular technique because I'm going to show you a way to add little pops of color to kind of make the image jump out. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so this first card features the beautiful floral image from the hand-drawn bloom stamp set. So we're going to emboss this on a piece of crumb cake cardstock using some white embossing powder. So I'm going to show you how to do the embossing. I'll show you how to do it once. The embossing and the coloring that I'm going to share with you is pretty much the same for each of the 3 cards that I have. So I'll show you the technique once, and then I'll show you the rest of the cards and how to make them. So let's start with this one. So you're going to start with a piece of crumb cake cardstock for the base of your card. So the cardstock is 5.5 by 8.5 inches, and it's just scored in the center at 4 1/4 inches to create the base of the card. Now, I also cut a 5 1/4 by 4 inch piece of crumb cake cardstock. So this is the piece that we are going to do our embossing and coloring on. So the reason that I decided to cut an additional piece of cardstock is simply because when we do the coloring with the Stampin Blends, which is what I will be using, they tend to bleed through the cardstock a little bit. So I wanted just an extra piece so that it doesn't bleed through the card front. So we're going to stamp this top section first, and then we will go ahead and use this additional piece. We'll stamp that second. So if you are not familiar with heat embossing, it basically involves the use of Versamark. So I have this Versamark stamp pad and the use of some embossing powder. So I'll show you how to do that. And then we have a heat tool that we will use to set the image. So we will start out with this Versamark. So I'm just going to use this Versamark all over my image, and then I'm going to stamp it directly on my cardstock, and it'll be kind of hard to see. I don't even think you can see that at all, but I can see it. You'll see it in just a minute. And then I'm going to stamp this bottom section. So I'm using this Versamark because this is what's going to grab onto that embossing powder. We're going to sprinkle some embossing powder on here. So the Versamark is just clear, and you can kind of see that it's kind of like a sticky clear substance. So it's going to grab that embossing powder that we are going to add next. So we're just going to sprinkle the embossing powder on our image, and I always say be generous with your embossing powder, because you want to make sure that you cover all the areas that you stamped with that Versamark. So, and always use some kind of tray to collect your embossing powder. So I just tapped off the excess, and now we can go ahead and heat to set. All right, so what you will notice is that when you do the heat embossing, it changes that embossing powder from like a grayish color to a bright white. So that's how you know that you've heat embossed everything. It'll be a raised image. It'll all turn white, and all that gray kind of dull looking embossing powder should now be shiny. All right, so now we're ready to do our coloring. So I am using a variety of Stampin Blends to do my coloring. So I have Granny Apple Green, this is Daffodil Delight, Magenta Madness, and Highland Heather. So basically what I'm going to do is just add color on different parts of the floral image here. So the thing about the Stampin Blends is that you don't want to just color directly over the white. You want to try to kind of just color in between the outline, the white outline that you have here, because if you color over the white, the Stampin Blends will actually color the white. So we kind of want to leave that little white outline around our floral images as much as we can, but you know, you don't have to be extremely perfect with it. You just want to add a variety of different pops of color. So the nice thing about this technique is that you do not have to color everything in. I mean, you can if you want to, but you can just add, you know, just a variety of different colors, and it just gives it really such a beautiful look. Okay, so that is the finished product. So you can see that I didn't color everything in, but I did add little pops of color throughout the image, and it just gives it such a really cool look. Okay, so the next thing I did is I just added some dimensionals on the back. So here you can see how it kind of bleeds through from using the Stampin' Blends. But I'm just gonna pop this up on the card, and that'll just give it a little bit of depth and dimension. And then I just stamped the greeting, the thank you greeting, on a scrap piece of rich raspberry cardstock, and I did the same kind of embossing. I just embossed the greeting instead of obviously the floral, but it's the same process. So, and then I just cut these out by hand, so I'm just going to kind of layer them together across each other like that. And then for the finishing touch, we'll just add a couple of pearls in random spots on the card. All right, so there you go. Pretty easy, and it's just beautiful. Like I said, you don't have to do a lot of coloring. You can just add little pops of color. All right, let's move on to the next card. Okay, so the second card idea features the exact same concept. I just did a little bit of heat embossing along the side of the cardstock and then did my coloring. So let me show you how to make this one. So again, I'm starting with a piece of crumb cake cardstock for the base of my card. Then I cut a 1 by 5 1/4 inch piece of pattern paper, and I'm going to put that on the right side of the card front. So I'm just leaving a little bit of matting kind of around the edges here. So I am switching out the colors just so that you can see what it looks like. This one I did more in neutral colors, and then here I'm adding the pop of rich raspberry color. All right, and then the next thing I did is I cut a 5 1/4 by 4 inch piece of crumb cake cardstock. So I'm not going to show you the embossing because I just showed you how to do that. So I just took that large floral image and I stamped it twice. So I did it once on this side and once on this other side, and then just did a little bit of coloring. So it just gives it a nice edging. You can use it this way. I decided to use it in this direction. You could even use it this way. So any way you want. And then the next thing I did is I just tore the cardstock. So I just tore just a little bit off the side here because this is going to get adhered to the card front. And I want this torn edge to overlap with my pattern paper. So I'm going to go ahead and add this to my card front. And then see, I have a nice pop of color here where I have it more muted over here. All right, and then the next thing I did is I just stamped a little greeting again on a scrap piece of cardstock, did my embossing, And then this time I used a bit of linen thread just kind of tied onto the back here. So I kind of made a bunch of loops. I know it looks pretty messy, but usually nobody will see that unless, of course, I'm showing you during a video. But I just made these little loops and held down the pieces with some dimensionals. So on this side, it looks just really cool. And then I could just put that right on the card. And I have just a little bit of twine up here on the top and on the bottom, so it just gives it a really nice look. And then for the finishing touch, again, I just added some pearls. So I'll add those real quick. And that's it. You have a really beautiful card. All right, let me show you the last card. Okay, and this last card idea features the exact same kind of embossing and coloring technique that I've been sharing with you. The only difference is that this time I decided to create a focal point using one of the stitched shape circle dies that I have. So let me show you how to make this. So again, we're going to start with a piece of crumb cake cardstock for the base of our card. Then I cut a 2 by 5.5 inch piece of pattern paper. So I'm just going to adhere that over towards the left-hand side, not completely up against the edge, but kind of more over towards the left with a little bit of space in between here. So again, I'm using rich raspberry, just a different color from what I used to create this one. And then we'll do a little bit of paper tearing here. So I'm going to tear the front of my cardstock piece. So we're just going to prep this card. And then I cut a 1 by 5.5 inch piece. So this is actually just the back design of this. So I'm just going to use that reverse side here on the inside of the card. So we'll just adhere this right along the right side of the card on the inside. All right, so the next thing I did is just tie a little bit of twine around the entire card front and then just created a cute little bow for the front. And the next thing you want to do is just stamp that top of that floral image that I've been using for the other two cards. Just stamp it, do your heat embossing with the white embossing powder, and then, you know, just color in different pieces of this floral image. And then you're going to take some kind of die shape. So I'm using one of the stitch shape dies. You can use any die cut you have, circle, square, whatever you have on hand, and just kind of move it around to the spot that you like. So I kind of like it here so that I can see all this different color, and then go ahead and cut this out. All right, so I just ran this through the embossing machine, so we'll just throw away this extra piece here. I'll pop this out. And then there we go. Look at the beautiful focal point that we have for our card. So let's go ahead and finish the card. So just add a couple dimensionals to the back of this and then go ahead and adhere it to your card front. And then go ahead and stamp another greeting using the heat embossing on some darker cardstock. And then I just cut out these little shapes with one of the Stitch So Sweetly dies. You can use any die set or punch that you have. And then go ahead and just add that to the bottom of the card. And then again, for the finishing touch, we'll just add a couple of pearls. And there we go. Another beautiful card. Okay, so there you go. Now you have 3 beautiful card ideas and some fun ways to use the heat embossing and some of your favorite coloring tools to create cards like this. And if you enjoyed this video, feel free to download the printable tutorial. You can find the link in the description below this video. Thanks so much for joining me today. If you enjoyed this video, please let me know by liking it and sharing it with your friends. And leave me a comment below to let me know what you enjoyed most about the video and the cards shared here today. Have a fun and creative day, my friends. Take care.